Morning. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about, again, one of the things that I find so meaningful in practice. The way that poetry can maybe point more clearly than anything else, for me anyway, to the nature of things, of reality. I think it's probably the reason that every koan is capped with a verse. There's a commentary, but there's also this capping verse that points to whatever it is that the koan is asking us to embody. And I've talked a couple of times, I think, in the past about this Japanese term. It's yugen. I don't want to call it a concept, but it's kind of this aesthetic of indirectly pointing at something to evoke rather than express something directly, which is what I think poetry does and koans do, and it's probably the best that we can do with trying to understand what our reality is. And so I recently came across, and I posted it online recently, but I came across this poem by Rumi that has really grabbed me, and in the sense of it's a beautiful poem, but it also, I think, points, or at least in me, evokes what practice is about, and what, especially Zazen and Shikantaza, what that is. So I think everybody's probably heard of Rumi, but for those that aren't familiar with Rumi, he lived in the early to mid 1200s, which is interesting because that's at the same time that Dogen, Saint Francis of Assisi, Meister Eckhart, some of these other great kind of religious thinkers lived as well. And at an early age, he became the head of this dervish community. And I never really understood what that meant either. So in looking at this poem, there's a poet named Coleman Barks. I don't know if anybody's heard of Coleman Barks. He used to teach at the University of Georgia, but he's a real Rumi scholar, and he's translated a lot of Rumi's work. And he explained that the dervish community the work of the dervish community was to open the heart, to explore the mystery of union, to fiercely search for and say truth, and to celebrate the glory and difficulty of being in a human incarnation. To these ends, they use silence and song, poetry, meditation, stories, discourses, and even jokes. They fasted and they feasted. They walked together and watched the animals. Animal behavior was a kind of scripture they studied. They cooked and they worked in the garden. They tended orchards. The dervishes have jobs in a workday world too. They're masons, weavers, bookbinders, grocers, hat makers, tailors, and carpenters. So, in other words, for me, they chop wood and carry water as well. And their practice seems to be, much like Buddhist practice, about experiencing the oneness and the interdependence of all things. Maybe let's say the unity of the relative and the absolute. So I came across Rumi's poem in the middle of nowhere. Actually, we were camping up in Georgia, and it was in the 20s over Thanksgiving, so we really couldn't do a whole lot. And we found this CD of Coleman Barks reading Rumi's poetry. But this one poem, and the poem is called "What Was Told That," has has really grabbed me. And so let me read it. And then we can talk a little bit about it. What was said to the rose that made it open was said to me here in my chest. What was told the cypress that made it straight and strong. What was whispered the jasmine, so it is what it is. Whatever made sugarcane sweet. Whatever was said to the inhabitants of the town of Chigil in Turkestan that made them so handsome. Whatever lets pomegranate flowers blush like a human face. That is being said to me now. I blush. Whatever put eloquence in language, that's happening here. The great storehouse doors open. I fill with gratitude, chewing a piece of sugarcane, in love with the one to whom every that belongs. So there's three things about this poem that seem to grab me. And it doesn't matter how many times I've read it, how many times I've listened to it. It just, every time I experience it, it grabs me the same way. You know, and the first one is what was told or said, right? And the other one is that part that's there's what was told to the rose, and then there's that made something, that caused something. And then the third one is where Rumi wraps it up at the end, and that's the one to which every that belongs. So those three things always seem to make me want to sit, actually. So our practice is to realize in kind of an experiential way the emptiness and independence of things as they are. I'm just trying to sum up for me what all of this practice is about. We're told, and hopefully we can experience directly through our practice, that nothing exists independently of anything else, that we can let go of our sense of separation. And I think in his own way and from his own Sufi perspective, that's what Rumi seems to be expressing. He's trying to express that same truth that we sit with in Zen and try to realize in Zen. Rumi's what was told isn't a statement of one thing about another thing. Rumi's what told is always being told by all things. And the first time I heard it, I heard Dogen's words about in his famous line about being actualized by the 10,000 things. And so in sitting with this, with what Rumi is pointing at, I started thinking, well, you know, is how else can I understand this poem and what was told? How can I understand that? How can I make that make sense? And I thought, well, for me, what he's expressing is manifestation, the manifestation of things, right? There's something that manifests that causes sugarcane to be sweet. So I thought if I substituted manifest for what was told, you know, in a Zen sense, would that make a difference? So I did that. and so it reads like this. What was manifested by the rose to make it open is being manifested here in my chest. What was manifested by the cypress that made it strong and straight What manifested the jasmine, so it is what it is. Whatever manifested sugarcane as sweet. Whatever manifested the inhabitants of the town of Chigil in Turkestan that makes them so handsome. Whatever manifests the pomegranate flower to blush like a human face. That is being said to me now. I blush. Whatever manifests eloquence and language, that's happening now. The great warehouse doors open, I fill with gratitude, chewing a piece of sugar cane in love with the one to whom every that belongs. So when I started thinking of it in maybe just using maybe more Buddhist language or Zen language, it started pointing me even more to what Rumi, I think, was trying to express. I mean, what is he pointing at? And how do I experience what was told to the rose that made it open, or whispered to the jasmine to make it what it is? How do we manifest what manifests? Or how do I experience what manifests the pomegranate flower so that it blushes like a human face? So what came to me was that Rumi is expressing at least what I experience as shikantaza, as just sitting. To sit and experience what was said to the rose, this things manifesting as they manifest, as they arise, Sit the cypress and the sugar cane. By sitting and letting go of the constant attempt to manipulate what I perceive arising by telling myself the story about it. I mean, I'm describing what I'm perceiving, what I'm experiencing to myself. It's just a manipulation, it seems to me. Constantly trying to manipulate that. So over time, for me, shikantaza has I think evolved in a way, or maybe deepened in a way, or changed in a way, that sitting and being able to experience what was said to the rose is the practice. To sit, and even if it's just for an instant, to let go of whatever manipulation is always there, that my ego is always trying to create. And that sitting in that way is the way, and getting back to, I think, a talk I gave a while back about the chant, the unity of the relative and the absolute. It's a way of experiencing that, whatever that is, that's hard to put into words. I think that's what Rumi was pointing at. So I was thinking back, you know, when we go to a sesshin and we're in Dokusan and we tell our teacher that our practice is shikantaza, you know, I started thinking that really requires that we ask the question that Rumi felt in his chest, right? That is, to let go over and over of the description of sitting, the descriptions, the story that we sit with and we experience as we're sitting, to let go of that manipulation of what's arising and just let it arise. Just to be is that practice. You know, it's the it's the practice of experiencing all I think of the Buddhist teachings, the two truths, the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links of interdependent co-arising. It's the practice is to be that, to experience that, not as a concept, but as an experience. So I think Rumi also touches on the results of maybe of doing that, right? Of hearing what was said or what was told to the rose or to the sugarcane. That made the experience. The indescribable and unknowable, what was said, that results in a manifestation of something that we experience. The opening of a rose, the sweet taste of sugarcane, the smell of jasmine, the blushing of a pomegranate flower, or the heat in my face when I blush, right? We've all felt that. As Rumi says, I think through Shikantaza, the great warehouse doors open. And what happens? There's gratitude. You know, chewing a piece of sugar cane, which I think is his way of saying, you know, gratitude arises in just everyday things, right? If we practice in this way. So I think sitting I think that's what grabbed me about this particular poem from Rumi, was that it somehow evokes what Zazen is, the experience of it, by indirectly referencing something that you know, in a way we all experience. And then I thought, well, if sitting sometimes, you know, there isn't just gratitude in sitting. That's not the only thing that arises. You know, sometimes there's stress, sometimes there's fear, sometimes there's anxiety, sometimes there's tension. So what then? And I think what then is what Rumi keeps saying, and that is, you know, to let go of that, to relax into just the experience of being, to relax into the whatever it is that was told to the rose as an experience. So again, as I reread and re-listen to this poem, to me it's describing or evoking what Shikantaza is as an experience. It's pointing at how we experience what the flower said to Mahakasyapa when the Buddha held it up, right? Everybody's heard that koan. So I'd invite everybody to, you know, maybe we can share, if anybody wants to, what their sitting practice. How do you experience that? You know, how do we all experience what was said to the rose, or to the cypress, or to the sugarcane? Or maybe even to the people in Chigil, wherever that is in Turkestan. And I think it's a poem like this is a great reminder of to check where our practice is. What is my practice when I, you know, sitting for so many, now going on decades, what's going on there, right? I think it's easy to fall into just, I just sit, you know, and I can kind of get in a rut. Not in a bad way, but it just becomes kind of habit. So for me, that Rumi's poem really kind of shook that up and made me really take a look at, well, what is going on when I'm sitting? How closely am I paying attention, and how much am I letting go of, constantly letting go of the story, and really listening to what was said to the rose. So.